Welcome to lesson 11.3. We are solving equations containing radicals as well as identifying extraneous solutions that really don't work. So a radical equation is an equation that has a variable inside the radicand. An extraneous solution is an expression that remember that a expression under the radical must be a non-negative. So if you have a equals b and a squared equals b squared is true, but if a squared equals b squared, then a does not always equal b all of the time. So those would be extraneous solutions, such as like 3 equals negative 3. That's not a solution. But 9 equals 9 is a solution, and so we have to think about things like that. We'll get to some extraneous answers here in a minute. So first of all, in order to solve a radical expression or an equation, we need to square both sides. So the first step is going to be to isolate the radical. So in this case, we're going to need to add 5 to both sides of the equation. If we add 5 to both sides of the equation, we're left with the square root of x equals 9. Okay? So now if we square both sides, we get x equals 81. We now have to plug it back into the original equation and make sure it works. So we get the square root of 81 minus 5 equals 4. And that is true, so we know that works. Go ahead and try the quick checks below real quick and check your work. Make sure your answers are correct and are not extraneous solutions. Sorry. X is 25, A is 81, C is 38. Let's look at this next example here. So we have a roller coaster, and we can see here that the height at the top of the roller coaster is h, and then the loop here, the radius is r. So we have the equation v equals 8 times the square root of h minus 2r. So our car has a velocity of 120 feet per second, okay, and at the top of the loop. And we know that the radius of our roller coaster is 18 feet. So we need to figure out how high the hill is in order to make sure that we get that velocity. So we can plug in 18 for r, and so we get h minus 36. So now what we want to do is isolate the variable, or isolate the radical. And so we're going to divide each side by 8. We get 15 equals the square root of h minus 36. So now what we need to do is we square both sides. And we get 225 equals h minus 36. Okay? And so if we add 36 to both sides, we can figure out that h, the height of the roller coaster, is going to be 261 feet. Real world example here for you. All right, let's look at the next example. So we now have a radical expressions on both sides. So again, we've isolated the radical, so all we have to do is square both sides. When we square both sides, we're left with 3x minus 4 equals 2x plus 3. And we can subtract 2x from both sides and add 4 to both sides. Okay, and so we get x equals 7. And then you can plug it back in to make sure it works, which it does. Let's identify extraneous solutions. So here we have an example in which we would square both sides, and we're left with x squared equals x plus 12. So you can see here how we have a quadratic equation we need to solve for. So we get x squared minus x minus 12 equals 0. And I'm going to solve this by factoring. This is my favorite method. You may solve it using any method you want, but I get x minus 4 times x minus 3, or x plus 3, excuse me, when I factor. And so I get the two answers of x to be 4 or negative 3. Do both of those work? Well, let's see here. If I plug in 4 plus 12 is 16. The square root of 16 is 4. Yes, that works. However, if I put in a negative 3 here, okay, negative 3 minus or plus 12 gives me 9. The square root of 9 is not negative 3 here. It's only positive 3 because I'm not looking for the negative root. So therefore, this is going to be an extraneous solution. So always make sure you're checking your answers for extraneous solutions. And again, we'll practice a lot of these in class. Please, if you have any questions, ask, write them down, make note of any VIPs or concerns that you might have.